Welcome back. I am so thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're going on a cinematic guided tour through a seriously dense, highly symbolic text prompt. We're going to literally dissect the anatomy of a scene to see exactly how a few carefully chosen words can build a whole philosophical narrative about human nature. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. The quote we're looking at right here is the absolute foundation of our entire explainer today. A powerful symbolic scene showing that greed is a curse. Every single visual element we're about to unpack in our minds stems directly from this one commanding directive. It's not just asking for a pretty picture, right? It's basically demanding a thesis statement. It wants us to instantly feel the heavy, destructive weight of greed. So how exactly does the text instruct us to build this out visually? Starting off with section 1. The center of the frame, where we find the golden trap. Imagine we're a cinematic camera, just panning purposefully from the edge of a dark room right into the center of the frame. And here is what we find waiting for us. It's a wealthy man sitting on a throne made entirely of gold and money. Honestly, that does not look very comfortable to sit on. And he isn't just resting there either. The text specifically tells us he's desperately grabbing at even more treasure. I really want you to visualize the sheer excess here. I mean, he's already elevated, literally supported by unimaginable wealth, sitting on a physical structure built from cash and gold. Yet his posture isn't one of satisfaction. It's this frantic, desperate acquisition. He has absolutely everything, but it is still fundamentally not enough. But here is where the imagery takes a really sharp, claustrophobic twist. Dark chains of greed wrap tightly around him. He isn't the master of this throne at all, he's its prisoner. And these aren't just decorative chains. The text explicitly calls them dark chains of greed. It's a brilliant way to illustrate the paradox of his situation. The very wealth he is frantically grabbing for, that's the exact material forging the chains binding him. His riches have literally mutated from a symbol of freedom into a suffocating trap. Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. We're looking at the collateral damage, relationships, and ruin. If we shift our camera outward to observe the tragic consequences of this obsession, the contrast is just stark. On one side, our central figure is still locked in that frantic state, desperately grabbing more treasure. But on the other side, the cost is brutally clear. His family and friends are walking away sadly. The source text is very deliberate with that word. They aren't angry, they aren't being violently pushed away, they're simply walking away, leaving him to his obsession. He is actively choosing the cold, hard gold in his hands over the warmth of human connection. The treasure keeps expanding, but his actual life, his circle of love and support, is entirely collapsing. And that collateral damage doesn't stop with his relationships. The text tells us the environment itself is reacting to his toxicity. The once beautiful land turns completely dry and lifeless. The world around him is mirroring his internal spiritual decay. Just as his loved ones wither and walk away, the very soil around his throne loses its vitality. His greed is so absolute, so all-consuming, that it literally sucks the life force out of the world around him. He's essentially the king of a dead world. Now for section 3, the background contrast, exploring a different path. Let's take a breath here and direct our attention all the way to the distant background of our mental canvas. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the structural juxtaposition the text creates. Up in the foreground, we've got our wealthy man, trapped and isolated in that dead landscape we just talked about. But in the distance, the text describes happy people living simple, honest lives. This is such a brilliant storytelling device. By putting these happy, simple people way in the background, the prompt gives us a visual baseline for normalcy and true contentment. It really highlights the heavy burden of the rich man by contrasting it immediately with the genuine freedom of people who've chosen a simpler, unburdened existence. Moving right along to section 4, the canvas and its cinematic art direction. Let's zoom out from the narrative for just a second to look at the prompt's structural rules. Because the prompt doesn't just want a quick cartoon sketch of this moral lesson. No way. It demands a highly elevated execution. We're talking dramatic lighting to emphasize the stark shadows of those chains and the cold gleam of the gold. Detailed expressions to really capture the frantic desperation of the wealthy man and the profound sadness of his family. It calls for a realistic art style in cinematic composition, all rendered in stunning 4K high quality. These stylistic constraints are absolutely crucial. They make sure the viewer can't just dismiss this as some simple fairy tale. By presenting this symbolic scene with hyper-realistic, cinematic gravity, the moral message hits you with maximum psychological impact. Which brings us to section 5, the true cost of greed. Let's synthesize the meaning.
Now let's slow down for a second and translate the vivid imagery we just explored into the core explanation provided by our source. So, the crucial point is the definition of greed itself, a trap that destroys relationships and leads to unhappiness despite having wealth. Every single visual element we've discussed today, the chains, the departing family, the dead land, it was all reverse engineered from this exact definition. The text proves, both visually and conceptually, that having money absolutely does not guarantee happiness. In fact, when you pursue it obsessively like this, it basically guarantees the exact opposite.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. Greed often brings suffering rather than true success. The man on the throne? He probably thought he was winning. I mean, he reached the absolute pinnacle of wealth, building a literal throne out of cash. But as we've seen, it was a false victory. His relentless pursuit didn't deliver success. It delivered profound, agonizing suffering. He traded a vibrant world and a loving family for cold metal and dark chains.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We've seen the anatomy of this scene. We've seen how every single word builds a devastating picture of a life wasted on accumulation. So, I want to leave you with this question. If excessive wealth builds a cage, and simplicity brings genuine happiness, what is the true measure of success? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.